Welcome to the Trailblazers. I'm Perry Rarick, your host and chief editor of Follow Your Buyer. The purpose of this interview series is to share with you interesting discussions I have with trailblazing thought leaders. They're innovative, they're thought-provoking, they challenge the status quo, and they serve as vanguards for positive transformation. Our trailblazer guest today most certainly lives up to that description. She is Jeanette McMurtry, author, speaker, advisor to business leaders. She's passionate about how businesses market themselves and communicate their value to target audiences, and she has guided numerous businesses to achieving phenomenal growth by thinking differently about marketing. And be prepared, she's likely to influence and transform you and how you think about marketing today. Jeanette has authored a number of books to include Marketing for Dummies. And if you buy it and read it, it doesn't mean you're a dummy. It's a great book. Big Business Marketing for Small Businesses is another title. And she has a new book coming out on September 10th titled Marketing Your Business. And you can reserve a copy now at Amazon. Jeanette, welcome to the Trailblazers.
Thank you. I am so honored to be here.
So today we're going to talk about a lot of interesting topics: the role of marketing, the role of the marketing leader, whether they're a chief marketing officer or a director, the relationship they have with business leaders and executives, strategy and tactics, and how they fit together, and also the challenging environment of information overload in which we exist. But first, Jeanette, you experienced a bit of an epiphany, and I don't want to overstate this, but you threw away all your books on traditional marketing approaches and you started studying psychology, specifically the psychology of choice. Can you tell us about that?
Oh, and it really was an amazing epiphany. And it's one that's lasted for my entire career ever since. So just a little backstory. I used to do a lot of work with Xerox. I traveled around the world and talked about the wonderful personalization technology that they had developed with their wonderful machines, and also including the software program XMPie, which many of the listeners today might be familiar with. And I was talking about how personalized direct marketing, and I mean not just in the text and not just your name, but copy that reflected transactions specific to the customer, as well as having customer personalization in the graphics. So it was just absolutely phenomenal and wonderful, all the things that they kind of pioneered and invented. And we were seeing 600% increases in response and even sales, amazing results. But then at some point, personalization became a commodity. And that's when I really challenged myself to think differently. How can I continue on personalization, but take personalization to the human psyche rather than just to the transaction of a customer and between a brand and a customer? And it was amazing. I started studying Jung and Freud and Kahneman, one of the best psychologists of our generation, who just recently passed, by the way. And then Early and Cialdini. I started studying all the current and past psychologists to really find out how the human mind works. And it was amazing. For one thing, there's something you probably don't know, Perry, is that 90% of what you think and what you do is governed by your unconscious mind. And most of us don't want to think that. And a lot of researchers have actually tried to mimic this research that was done originally by Gerald Zaltman of Harvard. And they're trying to prove, oh, no, we have more control than 90%. And no one wants to, admit that, right? And they came up with, okay, 95% of what we do is governed by the unconscious mind. So yeah, we have to face that. And marketers have to face that. But the real epiphany with this statistic is that if you are marketing to the conscious mind, which basically makes decisions based on tangible things like price and quality, convenience, customer reviews, those are all things the conscious mind processes and can make a rational decision about, right? You're wasting 90 to 95% of your budget, because that is not how we make decisions anymore. And actually, it never has been.
That blows me away. That is incredible. That got my attention. And so, yeah, so I'm in that group. I guess we all do that.
We
That's
all
incredible.
are.
Yeah. So what is it? So what's the psychology of choice then? So now I'm thinking, So that 90 to 95% of my subconscious activity, is that part of also, does that feed into the psychology of choice, or am I only relying on that 5% of my cognitive abilities?
Well, one of the things that I have concluded in my studies of how we humans make decisions is that we really are governed largely by our survival DNA. And that's something that I've come up with is marketing to the survival DNA, because most of what we do in our world, and we don't even realize it, is to avoid a loss versus to gain a reward. And there's a lot of psychological theory. It goes back to over 100 years ago. Psychologists did research then, and it never has changed, that most of human activity is based on two premises: the pursuit of pleasure or the avoidance of pain. So the most important thing that we can determine as marketers is what is the pain that our product helps our customers relieve, right? Are you in medicine? Are you in, businesses where you can have them avoid the pain of being lost in a job promotion pursuit, or failing on the job, or making a bad decision, or wasting a lot of money? What is it? In a business side, what is the pain that people want to avoid in a consumer product? Buying something very expensive that's disappointing, buying a car that's a lemon. What are the pain? What's that pain point? What also is the pleasure? So going back to the business to business example, business to business people are highly emotional in their decisions, but they do not realize it because there's so much at stake. What I just said, a bad decision, you buy a bad ERP system or a bad CMS, platform, whatever it is you purchase, and it doesn't live up to the promises the salespeople made, you're the one that looks bad. You're the one that wasted money. And if you have to start all over in the computer world, you're wasting years of implementation and years of progress while your competition moves forward. So there's a lot at stake. So there's a lot of fear there, but there's also a lot of anticipation of reward. Will I get promoted if this works well? Will I get a raise? Do I have job security? Which in the job market we have today is a really critical pain point and reward that marketers could be focusing on.
You raise such an interesting point. I have been in countless discussions with individuals, groups of people, teams, and we're talking about, is a customer more concerned about avoiding pain or seeking an opportunity, seeking the pleasure that you speak about? And the one on the pleasure, the folks on the pleasure side of that discussion often say, but if I'm only talking about the pain points, all my marketing materials negative, isn't that going to not work or hurt me in the long run? I, so I think you're voting for the pain. So how do the two of those work together?
Oh, I'm going to give you an example. You have to again go back to the unconscious mind. If we marketers do not appeal to address the triggers of the unconscious mind before we try to appeal to the conscious mind, we're going to miss the boat. So an example, years ago, I had a client in the real estate investment trust business. And the real estate market at that time was really struggling. Very few investors and family foundation managers or family wealth managers, whoever they were targeting, were interested in getting into their real estate investments at the time. And this client of mine would go into these accounts, call them up all the time, and hey, you guys, real estate's going great. You really ought to listen to me. And they're like, no, they wouldn't give him more than 5 minutes. So I said, well, that's because you're not addressing their fears first, their unconscious fears. Their unconscious fears go back to what I just said. Fear of making a bad decision, wasting money. They didn't believe him because unconsciously they believed that real estate was a really bad idea. Commercial real estate was a really bad idea at the time. And so he would come in and talk to their fear factors, but he was the opposite message. It didn't gel. So we changed our approach. And he started walking into these clients or calling them up or sending them emails that said, hey, I understand why you might not be interested in commercial real estate investment right now. It's been really difficult. There's been a lot of struggles. There's been some ups and downs. But let me tell you what we're seeing. And here's some of the opportunities that we see happening. And we really feel like people that are getting in on this business opportunity now are going to really reap rewards down the road. Are you interested in talking? He didn't just get the conversations. He closed all 4 of those accounts.
Yeah, that is very interesting. Such a valuable, great example, and a really valuable understanding of these emotions. For lack of another term, what I'll call them. So when you stated the fear component of that messaging is almost the modern hook or grabber that pulls the prospect in to see the opportunity.
Well, so it goes back to what I mentioned a few minutes ago, and that's survival DNA. My survival DNA is going to keep me from making a bad decision. I'm going to focus on the risk before I'm going to focus on the reward. And that's how we're programmed. Survival DNA is also interesting in a different sense. I mean, I have a friend who I've debated this argument with for a few times, former CMO and CEO in the luxury industry. And because I truly believe that luxury is really part of a survival DNA decision. Think about it. Gucci has a $200,000 handbag. You heard me, $200,000 for an alligator handbag. That's not even very big. People buy it. It sells out. Why? Because the people buying that handbag, when they spend that kind of money on something they don't really need to spend that kind of money on, because a bag at Target does the very same thing that Gucci handbag does, right? They feel superior. They feel like when Armageddon comes or the world starts to fall apart and the skyscrapers start to fall down in New York City, they have some kind of superiority and they're going to survive where other people who don't have what they have won't. It's completely unconscious. But that is really a lot of the appeal of a luxury brand. It makes you feel superior. And we are like animals. We have the same need to be at the top of the pack versus the bottom of the pack. When it comes to the pecking order, we need to see ourselves in a survival situation, not a follower or a existence situation where we may not survive and others will. We need to feel like we are going to win the game. And when you're able to do something like that, it creates that sense of survival unconsciously. And that isn't everyone's DNA. We are competitive by nature. We are gamers by nature. And when a brand can understand what is the survival DNA associated with my product and how can I make them feel like I'm feeding that and I'm fueling that, then you can start to talk to them and engage in conversations that are meaningful beyond just the product and become a relationship brand that doesn't matter how much you charge.
My goodness. I warned everybody that they're going to be challenged the way they think about marketing. So thanks for jumping into that immediately to make my words good. That is incredible. So all right. So as you were explaining all that, I'm thinking of traditional target audience demographics. I'm going to start with geography, start with some business titles, or in the B2B realm, and maybe one step deeper, and that's about it. Maybe age or level of responsibility or something like that. You've just turned that on end. You must look at demographics much differently.
I definitely do. We have certain things that apply to everybody, right? In terms of psychology of choice, and that's FOMO, the fear of missing out. And we also have, social proof, authority, reciprocity, and our need to feel like we're part of a bigger purpose than just existing, right? Those are things that apply to everybody. But there are certain things that a brand needs to do to go beyond the general triggers of human psychology, which I just mentioned. And that is, I need to understand the emotions behind different consumer segments they may be targeting and how a different segment might perceive life. Again, a lot of it goes back to our schematics. We are really governed by our experiences in life and by our cultures and the things that we're raised to believe. It's true. Look, since we're in an election year, we won't talk politics, but we'll talk elections. I did a radio talk show years ago, and one of my first hosts was Barry Goldwater Jr., who at the time was one of the preeminent political analysts and campaign managers. And one thing he said to me is, people spend 2 to 3 minutes paying attention to what the politicians say during the whole year long of campaigns, right? Because they really go with the vote their parents, their culture, their heritage, their communities have bred them to believe is the right vote. Wow, that isn't going to change. Another person who I've had the opportunity to get to know a little bit is John Haidt. He wrote a book called The Happiness Hypothesis, and then followed that up with a book called The Righteous Mind, which is all about how people think when they're making political voting decisions. And again, it goes back to culture and heritage. We call that schematics. It's a schematic of the consumer mind. And however your customer segments have been groomed to think about the world in which they live is going to influence how they perceive your brand, your product, your value, and if they trust your messages and your promises, or if they've been taught not to trust you. And you have to understand how the different segments might look at your category, your business category, from those lenses, and how they might look at your brand. So this is why it's incredibly important that you build a brand around trust. You do one thing that's inauthentic, you do one thing that speaks a little exploitation, or say one little tiny white lie, and you're done. Because consumers have so many different choices to choose from. They don't have to go work with somebody or patronize someone who they no longer trust. And one of the things that we've learned is that consumers really care more about a brand's values than they do about price or convenience anymore, right? That isn't nearly as important. And so they want to know what your values are in terms of your ESG, your environmental, society, social, and governance scores. And those are very easy for them to find, as well as your CSR activities. Are you giving back to the world in which you are the world that you are marketing to and you expect to support you? So those are really important things. And when you look at those lenses and look at your different segments, you realize there are different emotions that you need to appeal to within those categories, and within, again, the perceptions in the schematics of your customer segments. And what I have helped companies do is move from a USP, a unique selling proposition, which was the whole premise of most of those marketing books I threw out years ago when I started studying psychology. And it always bothered me that most marketing campaigns focus on a unique selling proposition, because back then and now, nothing stays unique for very long. Maybe 20 years ago, they stayed unique for maybe 15 minutes. Now it's less than one. Anyone can catch up with you so quickly. And if you're an entrepreneur or a small business and you're starting out with a great idea, good luck, because your competition's watching you and they have more resources and they're going to follow your good idea and they're going to duplicate it and they're going to run with it a lot faster than you probably have the resources to. So trying to be unique is a formula for failure. Sorry, but it is. So what I tell people to do is move from a unique selling proposition to an emotional selling proposition. And that emotional selling proposition is, again, rooted in messaging, experiences, even the iconology and the persona that you present in your digital graphics and your print graphics, whatever it is you have for your branding. They have to speak to that unconscious mind. Is there a certain customer segment that has more fear that you need to address? Is there another customer segment that's a little further on their Maslow's hierarchy of need pyramid journey, and they're looking more for something that's going to provide them with social status? So what are the different segments and where are they in their emotional journey towards self-actualization? And you need to build those ESPs, emotional selling propositions, according to where your different customers fall in their journey to fulfillment. Does that make sense?
I don't want to, yes. And I don't want to leave this notion of ESPs too quickly. Okay. So I think we could speak for a couple hours on this.
Oh,
So,
yes, definitely.
so maybe an example. Could you offer an example of, so what you're talking about is a different way to describe a target audience. Okay. Challenging all of those traditions we go with. So could you offer an example? What does that look like? And then here's the other question. I'll throw it in on you. When you go to a media company and offer, okay, tell me how much of your audience fits this criteria. Are they even prepared for that?
Well, their audience, a media company, yes, because they're focused on the different demographics, and they're focused on demographics according to culture, geography, generations. They're going to be really prepared with that, and good for them. You know, they can tell you what Gen X is buying. They can tell you how much money Gen X is buying in different category. They can tell you how Gen Z perceives one business category over another, and they can tell you, what some of the attitudes are that might influence behavior. Okay. If they can't tell you those things, they shouldn't be in business. But what they're not really telling you, unless they're going deep into a psychological profile, or what I call an ESP profile, for emotional selling proposition profile, is, again, what are the insecurities that these different segments bring? Now, one thing that's really interesting is that's making it really difficult for our marketing world today is that Gen Z is starting to come up into the discretionary income categories, right? They're starting to have the money, they're starting to get jobs, they're starting to have more spending, and they're having influence even how their parents spend money now. I have teenage kids, and they'll tell me, why are you buying from that brand? Their ESG score is really, really low. They've been destroying the environment. Don't bring that home again. It's seriously, that's their attitude. And those are the things you need to know. So if you're marketing to a Gen Z audience, you need to make sure that you're very authentic in communicating your brand values and your actions and your behavior, and let them know that they're a brand that they can trust to protect the world that they seek to live in as it is now. You need to be able to show that category how you fulfill their emotions and how you can help them move from being skeptical, non-trusting, and what are you going to do to prove that they can trust you to basically live up to the promises that you make. And that's where it becomes really important that your advertising isn't just about coming up with a campaign that makes a promise. Hey, we saved the environment. We donated to this charity. That doesn't really matter. They need to see the actions that you've done, and they need to see the impact that you've done. And they need to see this on an ongoing basis. So your advertising needs to be more than just social media posts and social media campaigns and digital campaigns, or wherever you might be advertising. It needs to be heavily focused on individualized journeys to nurture leads to a relationship of trust and need and partnership.
So in a B2B environment, sellers, solution providers are faced with teams of buyers, groups of buyers working collaboratively. So Gen Zers are going to be members of that team. They're going to have a voice, and it's going to be pretty strong. So there's some validation being done, but there's a lot of there are a variety of ESP categories. there are a variety of people on that, and you have to reach them all where they are.
That's a really good question. In fact, I don't think I've ever been asked that before, but it's really important to understand the different mindsets of your gatekeeper, to your middle managers, to your top executives that make the ultimate decisions. So let's start with the gatekeeper. The gatekeeper is likely going to be Gen X, Gen Z, and they're going to get younger all the time. This younger generation is extremely skeptical, and they're going to be looking immediately for communications that tells them what your values are, what your values and what are your purpose. And your values are going to be, okay, our ESG scores, our CSR activities, CSR being corporate social responsibility. And again, ESG being what you do with environmental, social, and governance types of activities, okay? Governance being how you treat your employees. So it's very important that you treat your employees well, so you get good reviews on Glassdoor and other kind of sites, because if you don't treat your employees well, that could be a factor for you to be taken off the short list for getting a big project or getting to be able to bid on something. So that's really important. They're also looking to see what your purpose is. What are you doing? So if you're like Warby Parker, your purpose is to provide affordable eyeglassware, but you're also donating eyeglassware to children around the world and other people around the world who maybe wouldn't have eyeglasses otherwise. What a difference you're making in the world. That's what you need to be aligned with, not just the ESG and the CSR, but a purpose. Once you can check off the boxes for those three elements, you're going to get their respect and you're going to stay on the short list. But then as you move up the ladder, you have people who are looking more for your operations quality, your testimonies from customers about ease of working with you. And as you get to the higher level, they all want outcomes.
Incredible. My daughter buys only Warby Parker. It's funny that you bring that up. It just incredible. So on the other side of this, though, your gatekeepers, the skeptical folks in that group of buyers, you can convert them to champions if you do this well.
If you do it well and you speak to what matters to them first, don't start speaking to them about, we have 98% customer satisfaction. Our clients love us. Here's a testimonial. Do you really think people believe testimonials anymore? No one's going to include on the website testimonial from a very unhappy customer. So, those don't have the same impact anymore, but we still look for the 5-star reviews. We look for the objective 5-star reviews, and you need to pay attention that they're going to be getting options to find customer reviews far beyond what you give them. So again, these things really matter. But if you're going to provide what I call arm the champion, you need to provide them with authentic and real information that isn't whitewashing them with all these wonderful things we do and how happy everybody is working with us. Provide them with, hey, here's who we work with, here's some of the things we've done, here's some of the challenges we've overcome. And, here's some of the things that we've had to really work on as a company. If you can admit your humanness, that we've had to work on this, and, some of our customers have asked us to do this a little differently, you're all of a sudden going to become real. And that's what that generation and the one just above them, that's what those two generations are looking for. Authenticity, willingness to admit their problems, work on their problems, and to do better and to be a true partner. And then again, as you get higher up the ladder, you're going to have your executives that are older, and they're going to be looking really more at the numbers. They're going to be working with their CFO to run your numbers against someone else's numbers, see what your ROI is, what your price per unit might be. They're going to be looking at all that stuff. So you need to have everything ready to share. But again, so the champion can take that. What I used to do is I used to prepare cheat sheets for sales teams. So when you're sitting down talking to somebody, you've got that data because you're going to be asked these questions. And if you can't answer questions about your own company and somebody at a competing company can, they're going to go ahead and you're not.
Just phenomenal. This discussion could go on and on. I find this very interesting, and I know the audience does too. But we're going to have to move on. We've got a lot more ground to cover. So hopefully we can come back and talk more about that topic again. But I want to shift a little bit to strategy and tactics and that relationship between those. I talk to a lot of folks and I'll ask them a question. So what is your marketing strategy? What's your approach? Trying to get that high level look at what they're doing. And then I hear, well, we're posting twice a week on social media, which is a tactic. So I suspect that there's a lot of confusion between what they are, how they work together, how to develop a good strategy. Can you help us out there?
I'm really glad you asked that question because too many people in the C-suite and even in the marketing department see marketing as just really busy activity with social media posts and digital ads, and they count their impressions and they count their web traffic increases and call it done. That is not marketing. That is simply busy work. And basically, in most cases, it becomes entertainment because those social media posts are trying to get attention and entertain and keep people clicking and commenting. But if they don't result in engagement and conversations with your sales prospects, why did you do it? That's where strategy comes into play. And your strategy has to be, again, built on the buyer journey, like your whole concept of follow your buyer. You need to know what that decision process is. And a big part of the strategy is first looking at the markets. Is this market growing? Is this market shrinking? And within this market, what are the customer segments that are growing and which are the ones that may be phasing out? So you need to figure out who your core customers are, identify those segments, and come up with the ESPs for each of those segments, as we mentioned earlier. You also need to have a customer journey based on a decision process. And I call these touch point journeys because you cannot really think that someone's going to buy your product, even if it's a simple low cost product or a very high end expensive product, with one ad. I mean, it's always been known that we don't really respond to an ad unless we've heard it 3 to 5 times and it starts to become familiar. Well, that 3 to 5 times is now a lot higher, like 5 to 10 times. It used to be a salesperson could reach out to a prospect 5 to 6 times and get a conversation. Now it's 10 to 13. We have a scattered attention span, and it's getting worse, as we all know. We are definitely challenge to keep people's attention or to get it in the first place. So once you get a lead, like say at a trade show and you generate all these leads, you don't just send them another ad and say, hey, bye, you saw my demo. You need to put those people on a journey, and the journey needs to be aligned with the decision process. So it's really key that marketers' strategy is built around how customers make decisions, not just built around how you want people to perceive your brand, because then it's just busy work.
So I know you're a big advocate on cost efficient marketing. So, somebody may be thinking, gosh, that's a whole different bucket of research now that I have to go buy to figure out how my customers make decisions. If that's not a choice, how do you go about that? Can you offer some tips on how a marketer can go about developing that touch point journey or buyer's journey, customer decision journey?
Well, for one, there's no excuse for not doing it now. There is so much free information out there. You can find out consumers' thought patterns within the last few months, projections for different purchasing trends. There are some really big companies that are constantly doing research on customers and consumers' attitudes and propensities to purchase in basically every business category, B2B and B2C. Some of the resources include Nielsen has a consumer index. They're constantly talking about global consumers in different categories around anything you can talk about. They have wonderful research. So Nielsen is a really good place to look. Another one is Edelman. Deloitte has great research. Edelman puts out a trust barometer every year. And if you're not familiar with that, you need to be familiar with that, because they're going to help you monitor the trust factor for your category. So if you find, like you're in financial services, that trust in your category is going down, then you really need to build your strategy around messaging about why people can trust you. And anytime a brand says, trust me, I personally know I should not. If they show me why I can trust them, I typically tend to pay attention. So again, these are some things you need to put into your strategy is, how is my category being perceived right now? How's the reputation of my brand? So another thing that we used to do all the time is we would do survey monkey surveys. And you remember getting those constantly, and people, oh, please take my survey. And they'd send you a list of 15 questions and expect you to actually take the time to complete those 15 questions so they could put together all their data fields and see who likes them, who doesn't, what they're going to buy, what they're not going to buy, all those fun things. Nobody does surveys anymore. So now you have to find different ways to get customer research. And one thing that I did I spent a lot of time on in my book and in Marketing for Dummies is a whole section on research tactics. There are inexpensive ways for you to get information on your consumers and what they're thinking about your category, which goes into your ESP profile, what they think about your brand, which also goes into your ESP profile and your strategy and your whole branding programs, and what their chances are of purchasing within the next 3 months, 6 months, or whatever time factor you might have. And what you can do is I think it's called Pullfish. Pullfish is a really fun product, and it's very new and very instant. You can go onto Pullfish and you can say, okay, I want to know how many customers are going to buy red high top sneakers in the next 6 months. And here's my demographics for my customer. You put all this stuff in it's an AI product. You put all your factors into their little filters, and boom, they come up with a survey. They come up with a customer database because they've got an access to customers within all these different categories. And they tell you, okay, we can get you 600 responses in 2 days, and this will be your margin percent, and this will be your 90, you'll be in the 98% accuracy. Do you want to do this? And if you do, you pay the money and you get the results back. And so you can really get data quickly typically within a day. You also have an ability to ask customers a question on your website. Every time they do a visit to your website, have a one question survey. One question, what is your most important criteria for purchasing in our category? Just find stuff out. And a lot of times if customers feel like answering your questions are going to benefit them because it's going to help you serve them better, they will respond. You don't need to offer gift cards, and you don't need to offer expensive gifts for people to do surveys anymore or pay them. Just give them a reason for why this is going to matter to them. And two, make it simple. A one question survey in an email. You can use your HubSpot or any other CRM allows you to ask very simple questions. And then you can really keep the conversations going and find out in real time if customers are leaning towards moving in a certain direction or going in a direction you don't want them to.
Awesome. That is such a great recommendation. So many ways to learn about your buyers. So a lot of organizations have groups of people who are customer facing. They have a lot of interaction with their customers. Is that a resource? Is that something you can use, or is it too subjective?
Interaction with your customers. So if you don't have a CRM system, you're not going to compete in this world. And there are many different price points for CRM system. HubSpot is obviously the gold standard, and they have the best customer service of any kind of software program I've ever used. So, congratulations to them. They're also very expensive. So if you're an entrepreneur just starting out, that might be too expensive for you. But there's Constant Contact, there's MailChimp, there are other providers of CRM systems that you can get into as an entry point. They're not very expensive, but it can help you keep track of the interactions that you have with your customers. And when you keep track of these interactions with your customers, you need to categorize them and start putting them into ESP profiles immediately on your CRM system. That's what you need to, that's what the whole CRM system is for. So you might create a profile for those who are nervous Nellies. They're laggards in the, adapting a new product, and they're nervous for change. Okay, so how is your messaging going to help them get from being scared to being comfortable? How are you going to get someone who's eager for this new technology to believe in your ability to provide the best technology? And how are you going to get an existing customer to realize that you're the best partner for the long term? So you're going to want to categorize your customers according to where they are in the buying process and in their relationship with you, and their own decision process. Again, nervous to eager, right? There's a lot of different ways you can categorize your ESP profiles. So once you put those in there, you have your salespeople, your customer service people, or you, if you're a sole proprietor, you need to maintain these profiles and take notes about this interaction. Why did they buy from you? Why did they not buy from you? Were they price conscious? Were they service conscious? Whatever it is. And then once you know where they are in their journey towards lifetime value, not just journey to your first purchase, but to lifetime value, you can set them up on a journey. And here's the one wonderful thing about CRM systems. Most of them allow you to set up a sequence or triggered automated marketing. And it doesn't cost any more to do this if you have the right level of a subscription with these different models. And again, there are many price points. I really suggest you Google them, go to Capterra, go to g2.com. These are resources that review the best CRM systems. In fact, there's a website called bestcrmsystems.com. It's something like that. Just anyone listening, please just Google it to make sure you get the right URL, but it's similar in that. And they, for free, give you a review of lots of different CRM systems for different kinds of businesses and different price points. So once you have a bunch of customers in your CRM system and you have them, in a relationship, you can set them up for a sequence. So again, let's go back to the trade show example. You come back from a trade show, you have 100 people that came to your booth, and you have all their information. You put them in your CRM system. Now what? Some of them, you might have your salespeople pick up the phone, call them, and schedule a demo. That's the goal. Some of them are not going to respond to a phone call. So you can set up a series of maybe 5 to 6 steps. The first step might be, thank you for coming to our trade show booth. Step number 1 is an email. Then this next step, your CRM system will trigger you. Okay, call that customer now. You call, try to get them in a phone call. Most likely won't happen. Nobody answers their phone anymore. So the step number 3 might be another email. Hey, thought you might like this white paper that'll help you make a really wise decision on your next ERP partner or your SaaS partner, whatever category you're in. Then another phone call. Then you have a different content to send them, or you direct them to a free demo or a webinar or something that you're offering. But you keep offering items of value, events of value, incentives, and they get these while you're sleeping. Or better yet, while your sales team is out there hunting for more prospects, because you can set them up, you set up a series of triggers, trigger an email reminder to your salesperson to call, or it automatically sends the email with the content that we just talked about. So you just set it up, program it, and then you go hunt for other prospects while these sequence just automatically execute. And as soon as somebody wants to jump in, then they come out of the sequence and they go into a relationship pattern.
So I love your example, the post trade show example, the 5 or 6 step process. We hope that it leads to a sale. We'd like a sale quickly, but it sounds to me like that 5 or 6 process is really to identify where they are in the buyer's journey.
Absolutely. And the best way, again, to keep the flow going, you identify where they are in the buyer journey. They will opt in or opt out of the sequences by responding to an email, is to keep it emotionally relevant. Because remember, every step, let's go back to the whole purpose of our conversation today. Every step in their buyer journey is highly emotional because, again, let's talk about the B2B space. The stakes are very, very high. So you need to make sure that every communication along that journey is related to a step they take. So how do you know what their decision process is? One, you look at the data. There, like I said before, look at all the industry data that talks about what's happening with purchasing trends, partnership patterns, challenges your customers are facing. Where do you find this information? Go to the associations that manage your industry. Go to the research terms. Make sure you subscribe to newsletters, media that cover your industry. Find out what's happening in your world. And that is going to tell you some of the pain points they're dealing with in their journeys, right? If you don't stay on top of the trends in your industry, as well as the emotional factors, you can't succeed. So you find out what all those pain points are, and then you look at the decision process. Okay, this is what's in their mind. How can I show them that I can help solve that problem? So every touch point needs to show how you can help solve that problem. So going back to the gatekeeper, if a gatekeeper is looking for these 3 criteria, your communication needs to start off not trying to sell them on something, but showing them that your brand fits the values they're looking for. And if the next step is we want a brand that has a good reputation, then show that. And this is where thought leadership is really important. Because again, we humans, going back to what I mentioned earlier about some of the key elements of consumer behavior, we respond to authority. If you're not familiar with the Milgram study on authority, you need to get familiar with that. It's very, very real, and human nature does not change. We humans will do bizarre things when we are told to do it by a person who we think is in a position of authority. Okay, study authority. We are also very much focused on making sure we don't miss out on what other people have. So people in this buyer journey, oh no, my competition has this, my competition is doing this, I can't miss out because then they're going to get ahead of us. So FOMO is very, very real. So the buyer journey needs to address all the elements of consumer behavior, which I'll go back and repeat. Authority is one, fear of missing out is another, and social proof. So one of the things that's really good, if you want to read Robert Cialdini's book on influence, it's really a lot about his research on social proof. He's the one that did all those studies on what little things that make us do things that maybe we wouldn't do. And one of his best examples is in hotels. When he said, okay, when they put signs in hotel rooms that said, please reuse your towels. Few people did, right? When they put a sign there saying, 80% of our patrons at this hotel are very environmentally conscious and they always reuse their towel. We hope you will do the same. Unbelievable how many more people started doing it because they didn't want to think of themselves as a slug that was ruining the environment when everybody else was doing their part. So again, you need to understand what the decision process is. Ask your customers when you do those one question surveys with your emails or your CRM or your website. Ask questions that help you get to a better understanding of the whole process. And then make sure that when you address those processes, you are inserting the things that help them feel more confident, and you're tapping into that survival DNA and helping them feel like they're on that aspirational journey to the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is also known as self-actualization.
Awesome. This is just blowing my mind. I really am enjoying the way you speak about this. I want to go back to something that you said earlier, and it was the value of a CRM, a good CRM, in gaining an understanding of your buyers, your customers, your current customers, prospects. But a lot of CRMs are going to kind of guide you into, okay, somebody gets in here, they're going to be an MQL, SQL. Okay, but you're talking about an ESP profile that is more detailed than that. So you have to be willing to change the framework, if I'm using the right term. Is that right?
Yes. Again, on these buyer journeys, what are the emotions associated with every step of the journey? What are the emotions associated with every conversation they're having as they're vetting you out? And what are they trying to avoid? Again, go back to what we said earlier. What's the pain they're trying to avoid? What's the pleasure they're trying to achieve? So when you can tie those messages into those aspects of the decision process, you're going to capture their attention. And the whole goal is to get a conversation. At that point, your sales team needs to be singing the same song that your marketing campaigns have. I mean, you tell me, how many times have you seen this in your career where a brand has wonderful marketing promises, we're this, we're that, and they appeal to all the things we're talking about now. But then the customer or the prospect gets involved in a sales conversation with a sales rep, and it's like, what?
So true. So true. And then you're disappointed and it harms the brand. It actually probably does more harm to the brand than any kind of marketing that's just bad.
Well, it goes back to what I said earlier, trust. I will
Yeah.
never trust that brand again because you sold me on a promise that your salespeople, one, didn't even know about, or two, didn't engage in. So it's really important that companies of all kinds and all sizes and all industries focus on making sure their sales presentations, their sales talk adheres to that ESP profile, and they engage what I call ESP selling. Because if you're not engaged in ESP selling, which is really the tactics of account-based marketing, but rooted in the emotional messaging, then you're not going to continue the journey to yes, because it has to be one thing, synchronicity from the beginning to the end.
So I'm going to offer a an example in the life sciences space, the pharmaceutical space. So everybody who's producing pharmaceuticals is concerned with quality and making sure that the FDA regulatory compliance, that the FDA is not doesn't have them on a hit list. And so if you want to use fear to get somebody engaged with your solutions, is it as simple as saying I've got this group of people actually responded to fear, so they recognize that, and that's an initial indication, and then you treat them as a group, or that is a touch point. Am I reading that right?
Oh, I really like where you're going with
Okay.
this because so many people are like, oh, we don't like fear mongering. We hear people, politicians every night and media people fear mongering all the time, and it turns us off. And a lot of times they lose our vote, right? We can see through that. We are intelligent enough to see through that. So is it fear mongering when a brand appeals to fear? No, because go back to what I said before, our survival DNA. And a lot of times we have to be coaxed from fear to faith. And when you can do that, you're going to get to that conversation, right? And that's the whole goal of marketing, is to get to that conversation. So fear, how do you address fear in marketing? Let's just go to the insurance industry. The insurance industry wouldn't exist if there was a huge fear of loss. Those work. And right now there's a great campaign right now. Subaru has been doing this campaign. If you watch TV a lot, you might have seen it. And they show a car accident, the car is totaled, and they show a father and his young girl walking away. They say, hey, they had a Subaru, they walked away. That's a really good example because we all have fear of what's going to happen to our family members or to ourselves with all the driving that we do in society, that's a fear. And so what they did is they addressed that fear, but they immediately get to the solution. And so you have to be able to address these in a way that's real and authentic and not hyped up. And so there's insurance does this all the time. Are you fearful of losing your home to an earthquake? Well, you don't have to fear if you have XYZ insurance, right? And one of the things that's really important is we don't just fear the loss of what the product is that's going to help us not to avoid losing car, home, whatever. We also fear that the insurance company won't live up to their promises. Yeah, this is where you have to go back to what I'm saying. You have to build an authentic brand based on those emotional selling propositions and trust and authenticity. So it's really interesting. One of the top brands, there's customer confidence indexes, and they're done yearly, sometimes twice a year by different groups. And just Google customer confidence index, and you will see the brands that have the highest confidence from consumers and prospects. That's where you want to be. You want to be in those lists. And the one that's been on the top of that list for many, many years is USAA Insurance. And people swear by them. You call anybody who has them and they'll say they stood behind me. They didn't question it. They delivered, and they delivered fast. That is what's really important. So going back to your fear, there's a lot of things that people need to know they can overcome with you. And so again, it's not fear mongering. It's stating the facts and showing how you will take care of somebody.
I'm glad we've spent so much time on fear because you've really helped explain it. And so fear, but it has to be real. You can't just make something up. That builds trust.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. But it's also, you have to be very intentional about quickly moving to the solution. Am I hearing you right?
That's my recommendation, because this is really interesting research. I've had so much fun studying how we respond to stimuli as a human. What I want to just make a point, human nature that we're talking about is the same. Beginning of time to the end of time. Human nature will never change. It does not change across cultures either. Okay. And there's a lot of research that shows that if you stick too strongly to that fear and you create too much fear, people will disconnect. They'll run away. They don't want to believe what they don't want to believe. I mean, look at our political situation. There's so much evidence for this point or that point or this candidate or that candidate. It doesn't matter how much evidence you present to somebody to try to persuade them that this candidate's better than that candidate or whatever, this party versus that party. They will believe what they have always believed because it's what they want to believe, and they will only hear what they want to hear. And there is a threshold. American Express, I was blessed to work with American Express. I was a senior international marketer for American Express early on in my career. That is my learning ground. In fact, I wrote my first book, Big Business Marketing for Small Business Budgets, focused on what I learned at my time at American Express, because it was so mind-boggling what a brilliant company they are. And they still are, and they probably always will be a pioneer in customer centricity and really focusing on what matters to customers. So one of the things I learned from them was that there is a threshold of fear. They did the research and found, and I was part of this process, we found that if we had too much fear in an ad, people would be so upset that this could happen to them, they wouldn't want to think about it. They blocked it out. So you just have to address the possibility and then move on to the solution. But if you hit it too hard, you're done.
Just great stuff. So we're going to take a short break. I'm speaking with Jeanette McMurtry, and she is just turning marketing upside down today. So stay with us. We're going to be right back to the Trailblazers. We're back with Jeanette McMurtry. She is a marketing phenom. This has just been a great discussion, and we're going to continue now. So I want to talk, you've got a great deal of experience doing hard things, Jeanette. And I want to talk a little bit about one of the things that marketers would say is the hardest, and that's the interaction between the business leaders, the executive suite, how to provide them value, how to get them on board with your thoughts. Can you talk a little bit about that relationship and some of the what right looks like in terms of your experience?
I love this question. I thank you for asking this because this is something that's really on my mind a lot. With AI and a lot of other noise in the business industry, marketing is seemingly becoming more of a perceived tactical role when really, if it's not a strategic role, your brand is not going to succeed. I don't care what business you're in or not. You need to have a strategic marketing support system within your company, and that starts with having a strategic marketer on your team. And C-suite, CEOs, CFOs, COOs, you need to understand that. Because if you don't have a strategic mind looking at your market opportunities, looking at your market threats, monitoring the competition, monitoring all the different aspects of the environment, you are not going to succeed. And all the marketing that you do right now, all the social media spends, the SEO buys, all the things that you do that you're being told you have to do, and you're hiring a low-level, entry-level person to do for you, are going to be a complete and utter waste of money. The marketing executive on your team is there to do more than just cut and paste social media posts every single day. That is not marketing. You need a marketer, and this is how I start my new book out, is how do you identify a growing market and a shrinking market? One of the examples that I use is in the pet industry, and this just shows you how a marketing executive needs to think and needs to advise the C-suite. Okay, so pet industry, people think, okay, it's huge, it's growing constantly, but what are some of the factors? If you're a small pet store and you need to plan your inventory, for the next 6 months to next year, look at the housing market. Who thinks to do that? When house ownership, or I should say home ownership, goes up, so does the number of people who own dogs. Interesting. Because if you rent, you can't have a pet usually, right? So as interest rates go down, that's an indicator that your pet store might do better, because that's an indicator that housing is going to go up in terms of ownership, entry-level homes, and all sorts of different things. And that's going to impact your ability to reach more people that actually have dogs. And there's going to be a bigger base of people for you to sell to. Therefore, get your inventory up, put more money into your marketing, and really push for those homeowners, maybe new entry-level homeowners, get into those markets and try to sell to them. When everything else, interest rates go up and housing goes down, maybe cut back a little bit. Because if you spend a lot of money marketing to a audience that doesn't have the ability to buy your product because they're renting and they can't own a dog, you're wasting everything. So these are the things you need to look at. You need to look at economic indicators. You need to look at Wall Street. There's a really important thing to look at that some people don't think to look at: mergers and acquisitions. Look at the M&A activity in your category. That should tell you a lot about what you need to be doing if you're starting out. You might want to start out with an exit plan in mind, because you can see who's buying, who's going to acquire you. You can see how hard it is for you to get to a certain point of profitability. If the bigger guys are getting bigger, these are all things you need to look at. And you know what? You need to be brave. You need to go into that C-suite and say, we're going in the wrong direction. If we continue to go down path A, we're not going to have anyone to sell to because this market is shrinking, or our competition is getting so big, they're going to own all the media, and we're not going to be able to keep up in terms of buying media. That's one thing. May I go on?
Yes,
This is a big question.
So when I came up with that question, that's not what I expected to hear, but that is a gold mine. But I have a lot of other questions about that. So people don't come with a label. I can think strategically. So how do you test for that? You've got a smart person, you want to hire him on as a marketer. How does an executive who knows nothing about, or well, who's not dedicated to marketing, how do they test for a strategic mindset?
I don't know that you really do test for a strategic mindset as well as you hire experience.
Okay.
there's a real trend to dummy down the marketing effort and hire people that know social media. It does not matter if you know TikTok. It does not matter if you know how to place ads across Facebook and Instagram with one buy. I mean, we all do that. I don't care how young or how old you are. It is so simple to set up Google My Business, which is now Google Profile, to set up those accounts and buy advertising. It doesn't take rocket science. It just takes somebody with a credit card who can fill in the boxes on the prompt, and then your ad starts tomorrow, and then you can go in and look at it and see how many impressions and clicks. And if you're not experienced, you're going to go to your CEO and say, look, we're successful. We got 1,000 impressions, not a single lead, but hey, we got impressions. Oh, and who cares if the impressions are among people that are not in our purchasing category, but hey, we're doing well. That's what you're going to get if you don't hire experience. Because you know what? People who've been doing marketing for a long time didn't have all these false positives with all the social media we have. It's a false positive to say you're a successful marketer because you got a lot of impressions or a lot of web traffic. If it doesn't take you to if it doesn't drive leads and generate qualified leads that have a propensity to purchase, you just wasted all your money. CEOs don't understand that. So people who've been doing marketing for a long time that have learned to look at the data, learn to analyze the trends, spend half of their time, if not more, analyzing the market and consumer minds, staying on top of consumer minds, doing the research I talked about. There's research panels you can get into. There's research you can study. There's tons of secondary data. If you don't have a marketer who's willing to sit down, talk to your customers, and find out what that decision process is, none of your marketing is going to pay off. None.
Awesome. That is it just rings so true. Not something that I always keep top of mind, but hire for experience and strategic thinking. And so is this, I guess it would depend on the size of the business, but is this a dedicated role? They're solely focused on that? Or can you have somebody who's like a Swiss Army knife that has that capability and they spend some time on it?
Well, a good marketer can strategize and execute. The most efficient way to hire a marketing department, if that's your question, is to hire somebody who has the experience and again, how do you test it? Is this someone who builds decisions on data, who acts on data, so has to analyze the data for markets and consumer trends and all the things we've talked about? That's one test. Or do they just go off creative and social media impressions? So there's the test. How do you measure success? And what do you base your messaging and your media spends on? Okay. So that's one way to test. But the most efficient way to staff a marketing team is to hire one person with experience and let that one person contract out the execution. Because with contractors, you only pay for what you need. I sound like an insurance commercial, but you only pay for what you need and when you need it. You have no obligation to pay that person on a monthly basis. You have no payroll tax. You don't have to pay benefits. You pay a contractor what you negotiate up front, get the project done. And if you're not happy with them, you're not stuck. And there's a lot of freelancers for SEO, and there's a lot of freelancers for graphic design, even though we don't need graphic design. Sorry to all my friends in graphic design. You don't need it as much as you used to because you can just plug in things and AI can create a video with voiceovers and music, everything within 5 minutes. I mean, there's so many things you can do on your own. But you can hire someone to help you make sure that those are edited correctly, done, whatever tools you need. And you can hire people for content writing. You don't have to do your own writing. You hire people that have a certain skill set and you use them as you need them.
Awesome. Just awesome advice. Thank you very much. All right. So I'm going to go back to the original question because you were about to say something else. And so the original question was that relationship, between marketing and the executive suite or the business leader. And you were about to make another point.
Oh, and I was supposed to remember where that other point was. Well, your marketing leader needs to advise the C-suite on opportunities, not just on campaigns. And that's where it's really important that you have a strategic thinker who's looking at data and looking at marketing spend and analyzing and measuring. Now, one of the things that's really, really critical for this marketing person to do is to measure absolutely everything you do, every dollar you spend, and create learning plans. So you have a learning plan, you can create champions. And once you identify a champion, you have a benchmark for which you can build other campaigns that are already proven to work before you even get them out into market. So one of the things you have to do is you have to measure the impact of every single thing you do. And there's no excuse for not doing it. Google Analytics tells you everything you need to know about SEO and Google Ads, right? So do all your CRM systems. It tells you everything you need to know about open rates, engagement, how long somebody engaged. It's really important to be able to go into to have a campaign, and you have a campaign that has a specific landing page on your website. You can monitor how many people go to that one page during that campaign. And what's really important to monitor is how long they stay on that page. If they don't stay on that page, your messaging is really wrong and you better change it quickly. If they stay on that page, how many of them do the desired action, which is to complete a contact us form, schedule a free demo, or come to our trade show booth, whatever the action is, how many people on that page actually fulfilled the call to action? That's how you can measure if you're successful or not. And when you find that you have a certain campaign that gets a lot of attention on that landing page, gets a lot of contact us forms, and translates into qualified conversations for your sales team through demos or whatever the call to action was, you've got a champion.
So I'm so glad you brought up measuring results because a typical, I'm going to share with you the worst example is, okay, hey, I spent this money with you. I got this list of leads and, none of these people bought from us, but you're talking about a deeper level of metrics and I'll go all the way back to where we started with the ESP profile, but you're talking about a different level of metrics.
Yes, there's more to measure than just open rate and CTR, which is click-through rate. Okay, obviously you need to know because you need to test your subject lines. You need to, and with all the digital technology we have, you can do A/B testing in 10 minutes and figure out what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. So there's no excuse not to monitor that stuff. But you also need to test the level of engagement because engagement is more than opening an email. Did they read the whole email? Did they reply? What were the questions they asked? Did they schedule a demo? Did they stay on that buyer journey? Okay. And that buyer journey is that touch point journey. So as you start monitoring these sequences I talked about earlier, and you monitor which piece of content you offered got the most downloads, that's key. Because that means that's a topic that's going to engage people. So you take that topic now and you parse it out to social media posts. You create email campaigns around it. You create segmented marketing around it. You put that on your website. Now you can't have a static website. You have to have a dynamic website. People come to your website. If it's the same every time, they're not going to come back. But if you have a dynamic website where new content flies on once a week, here's our new white paper. Click on it now. Here's an interview with our CEO. Click on it now. Watch this video. If you have something new that's of value to them, every single time they come to the website, they're going to keep coming back. That's engagement. And that's how you measure your success as a marketer. Are you building engagement across different decision points in that touch point journey? And are your targeted qualified leads engaging with you in different channels? Are they listening to your videos? Are they paying attention? Because going back to what I said, it used to be 5 to 7 touch points and a salesperson could get to a sales conversation, and it would either be go or no go, and they'd move on to whoever it was, or they would write the contract and get the money, right? Now it's 10 to 13 touch points. So you have to have all these different touch points, and you need to measure every one of them to make sure that they're going to keep people engaged. And that goes back to strategy of understanding how the decision process is made, the emotions, conscious and unconscious, that trigger engagement in different content, different themes. And then once you trigger engagement, they read your paper, how do you follow up with that in an authentic way that supports the marketing messages that you've delivered?
How do you convince the CEOs and CFOs that all of those things, the ones that are the CFO that says, hey, I gave you this pile of money and you haven't given me anything. How do you convince them that that matters? How do you change their thinking?
Well, if you're doing the things we're talking about, you're actually going to have leads to deliver to them. If you don't, then you're just, all you're doing is showing all the impressions for the money spent, and that isn't going to keep your job. That's one of the troubling things that you just tipped on, is that marketers don't last very long. You look at any marketer on LinkedIn and they change jobs every 1 to 2 years.
Yeah, that is a big problem. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
And it's not because they didn't succeed, it's because the CEO was impatient enough to let them succeed. And a
Ah,
lot of times you have to educate, and this sounds like you're, managing expectations, but you do, because we live in a world, I don't have to tell you this, Perry, we live in a world where instant gratification has been redefined, and it's constantly being redefined at a nanosecond, because everything we do is constant, it's immediate. You need information, Google this, Google that, and you have it come up immediately on your phone, on your watch, on your computer. You constantly get what you want when you want it, and we have no patience for not getting what we want immediately. Well, that's unfortunately an attitude that C-suites have towards marketing. It's wrong. You don't expect your operation people to create a new jet engine in a day. So why do you expect marketing to turn off in a day? So what you have to do, and this goes back to your first question, you have to go in with a full-on strategy. You have to educate. This is what we're going to do. My first 3 months on the job are we're going to be learning. We're going to be doing research. Here's the research we're going to fine-tooth comb through, and we're going to find that this is what we're looking for. Then we're going to build our messaging, and we're going to build our ESP platforms. And then I'm going to go back to all of the assets we have for this brand, and we're going to update every single asset we have: our websites, our social media pages, our email campaigns, our media presence, our media kit, everything we have that helps us to create communications with any kind of market. And we're going to change it to fit what we just learned here. And this is how we're going to execute, and this is how we're going to measure. And when you do that, you have a plan that's much like an operations plan to build a product. And that's how the CEOs think. So we marketers have to get into that product management mindset and show people, here's what we're going to do to create the blueprint, do the protocols, test you're in pharmaceuticals, you get this. A clinical trial takes 10 years. So you have to take the different steps to make sure when you get to the end product, it's accurate and it works, and this is what you can expect. And when you can do that, you're going to be, one, more credible, and you're actually going to deliver results much more effectively because there's an expectation for how the results come.
you're describing a marketer who's very proactive and engaged with the executive suite as much as everything else they're doing. So here's a question, and I think I probably can imagine what you're going to say. How does a marketer challenge an executive?
How does a marketer challenge an executive? Well, it's the same way you respond when the executive challenges the marketer. How's that? There's really one word: data.
Ah, of course.
When the CEO challenges the marketer, you show the data to prove that
Yeah.
you're going in the right direction,
Yeah.
and that the results are going in the right direction, right? And that the markets support your suggestions, your recommendations. Well, vice versa. When you see a CEO, and this happens all the time, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It all depends on the relationship you have, obviously, as with anything. But seriously, when you need to challenge your CEO, you need to show them the data. You know what? And I've been in this situation. I very recently was in this situation where I took a position, and within a week I realized the agency was totally exploiting and taking advantage of the brand, because the agency knew there wasn't a single person on the team that understood even the basic fundamentals of marketing. So the agency was spending 3 to 4 times more money than they should have, producing very little results, and blaming it on everything but the agency, when that's where the blame needed to go. So of course I spoke up. And so what I did to speak up was I got the data. Here's the data that shows we are overspending for the population we have. We're spending like we're Victoria's Secret or REI, and we only have a market that's a fraction of who they're marketing to. So we need to stop overspending. We need to look into these markets, and you need to make the decision to let me guide our spend and our market and change how we're doing some things. But you have to have the data to show that. And I think that's a really, I think the challenge I bring up is not just unique to certain industries, even though certain industries that happens more often, agencies can do that more easily than not. Some industries have savvy marketers on staff, others don't. When you don't have a savvy marketer, this happens all the time because agencies make a lot of money off the media buy. So if they can overspend, they'll overspend. And I don't mean to say agencies can't be trusted, but it happens. Okay. There's a lot of trustworthy agencies out there. So please don't take that wrong, but it can happen. So if you can again pinpoint what the media spend should be for your population, you're marketing towards a niche and it's a fraction of what the whole market is, then your budget should be according to that niche. You've just got to have the data to show what you're doing and tell them, hey, we're going in the wrong direction. Here's where we need to go. And if you can do that with numbers, case studies, and again, research that shows that this data is accurate, you're going to have a great relationship because you're going to save the CEO embarrassment from overspending, wasting a lot of money, and not reaching shareholder goals.
This is incredible. You have such a clear line of reasoning that runs through everything that you talk about, all the way back to the beginning when we first talked about the psychology of buying, understanding your buyer, all the touch points, the journey they take, having a strategy, tactics that support it, communicating that to the executive suite. It's a nice, clear line. Before we leave the relationship between marketing executive, anything else, any other advice?
Well, I'm going to just build on what you just said because this is an important concept. Psychology-based marketing does not just apply to using psychology for messaging for your ad campaigns and your emails and your social media and your content and all the things that help people feel confident and comfortable with the decisions they make, okay? The emotions of helping people feel secure in their survival DNA, right? It also applies to your relationships with people. So go back to the CEO. What are the greatest fears your CEO addresses every single day? Now, if you're a good executive, you know what the shareholder goals are. You know the pressure the shareholders are putting on your CEO. You know the expectations of that CEO to perform in a certain timeline. So if you go to that CEO and say, look, I'm concerned that we can't meet that goal, but here's a different path that will help us exceed the goal. Here's the data to back up my thinking. What do you think? Will you give me a chance to test this out? You're going to become an ally that CEO can't live without. You're more than a cut and paste marketer.
Awesome. That nice cap on that entire. All right. So we'll take the left and right limits off and just open up our thinking. What are some, you talked about the churn of marketers, changing jobs so quickly, the vast difference between a senior experienced marketer and an entry level and the gap they've got to fill. We're overloaded with information in this environment of information overload. What are some general top of the mind tips that you would offer marketers and maybe even executives when they're thinking about marketing?
Well, going back to the topic of this conversation in the first place, be emotional. Spend your time to find out what those emotions are and how the psychology of choice applies to your business category and your current customers. Okay. Do all the things we talked about to discover those things. Once you know what your emotional message is, you have to be present. So if you're not willing to spend some money to be present, you're not going to be able to build on the wonderful information you just found out about the emotional influencers, the unconscious triggers, right? And the conscious triggers. You need to bite the bullet and you need to spend money on SEO. You need to have a Google Ads campaign. I spent a lot of time in both my books, Marketing for Dummies, and my new book talking about how to do this right. You can spend a lot of money on Google Ads and not get that much in return. Or you can spend a little bit of money and get something in return. There are a lot of ways to do it right. You need to be present. You cannot pretend it doesn't matter if you're above the scroll on those search result pages. You have to be present or people will not know who you are. So you have to get your brand recognized. So it's important that you have a presence with Google Ads. It's important that you understand SEO. So again, if you're a sole proprietor or you are a sole marketing department, you need to know what a meta tag is and a title tag is. You need to know what an alt tag is. You need to know how to get into your own website, the back end, and tag every single page with that emotional promise that you're building your brand around, and even tag your images. You have to do a lot of tagging. You have to do a lot of backlinking. This is how you elevate your SEO. You cannot ignore SEO because, oh gosh, I think 93% of consumers, when they're starting to research a choice, start with Google. So if you're not playing into those algorithms, no one's going to ever see you. You need to also do thought leadership. Now, thought leadership is what we used to call public relations or media relations. And that's actually, I started my career in public relations. I worked for Ketchum, which is a huge, wonderful communications firm back in Washington, D.C. I love that aspect of marketing because marketing is every form of communications. You need to make sure that you have authorities in your on your team. If you're the marketing person, you need to schedule interviews for your CEO with the industry media, mainstream media, podcast interviews, get them present because we buy from people. We don't buy from businesses. We buy from people. And if I've never heard of your CEO and another company's CEO is telling me everything I need to know to have that emotional confidence and to tap into my survival DNA and to make good choices and achieve my aspirations, then I'm going to go with that authority and I'm not going to care about your brand because you're not telling me anything that makes me feel confident that I'm going to get to where I need to get. So again, you need to build an authority for your brand through thought leadership, and you most certainly need to make sure that you are present and that you are engaging your customers in your brand and your causes and your purpose. All of these things might seem small and it might seem overwhelming, but it doesn't matter how big your business is, you can do it. You have to just start realistically and stay committed to the path of building a brand around emotional values, building a brand around purpose, paying attention to your ESG and CSR values and communicating those, establishing yourself as an authority in your field, and most importantly, living up to the promises you make in your marketing campaigns.
Awesome, awesome advice. Just really great stuff. So you have a book coming out on
I
September
do.
10th. We can pre-order it through Amazon. It's called Marketing Your Business. Tell us, can you give us a little, tell us a little bit about, maybe give us a little introduction to it.
Well, Entrepreneur Press is the publisher, and you've probably heard of Entrepreneur Magazine. It's the same company. They've started a book series about start your business, grow your business, fund your business, and I'm very honored. They asked me to write the book on market your business, which I have just done. And I really focused on creating the foundation for successful marketing. So I kind of see this as a prequel to my Marketing for Dummies. This one focuses really heavily on, again, identifying the right market, establishing the right niche, identifying shrinking and declining markets. What do you do and how do you adjust and how do you adapt? And then really building, again, these kind of messages and profiles. It talks a lot about putting together the ABM. I've mentioned today, which is account-based marketing. I've mentioned today that your marketing is nothing but entertainment if you can't follow it through to the sales journey, to the closure, to lifetime value. So I've focused a lot on these strategies and techniques and how you bring marketing and sales together into one synchronized effort to get from introduction to lifetime value. So it's really more of a strategic play with very step-by-step guides for putting the strategies together. And then Marketing for Dummies, as you might know, the Dummies books are very tactical. They go through step by step. How do you set up an Amazon front store? How do you set up an eBay store? How do you then tag your SEO backend if you have WordPress or if you have Webflow? What are all the different tactics to help you do this? And it has a lot of more advice on which CRM system to buy, which research program to hire, all those different things. So I'm really excited because I really think it helps entrepreneurs as well as business operators and managers and marketing teams, no matter the size of the business, really understand the strategy to help those tactics pay off. Because if you don't have both, you're not going to get that ROI.
This entire framework is so interesting, and it's big. It's a big topic. Do you offer a clinic? I didn't ask you this earlier, but do you have a road show you take out and kind of
I
explain this?
have done that. I've mostly been blessed with opportunities of companies coming to me and say, come in and do a customized shop for us. And I've done these customized workshops, 2-day training courses or 1-day training courses for like Sony, Country Financial, Fisher Investments. I've had a wonderful time doing these customized training shops. I am considering doing some kind of online shops that are a little bit more, general for people to be able to take advantage of. So thank you for asking that. I'm hoping to do that in the next few months.
Okay. And now how can listeners contact you?
You can contact me on my LinkedIn page, which is just my name, or my website, which is JeanetteMcMurtry.com, which is pretty easy to remember. um, so that's the best way to reach out to me.
All
And
right.
I appreciate that. I thank you so much for including me today. You've got a
Yeah.
great program, and I'm very honored to be a part of it.
Well, thank you. I'm honored to have you. What a great discussion. This has been a lot of fun. You're very prolific on LinkedIn. I love your content. Every time I see something, I just I really get something out of it. It's very thoughtful, very
Thank
insightful.
you.
So my guest today has been Jeanette McMurtry. What a great guest you've been. Thank you very much for
Thank
joining the
you.
Trailblazers.